The soft glow of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Aubrey stood at the edge of the cliff, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The salty breeze tousled her chestnut hair, carrying with it the whispers of a life she once knew. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled piece of paper, the weight of its contents far heavier than its physical form. Aubrey closed her eyes, allowing herself to be transported back to the moment that had set everything in motion. It had been a crisp autumn evening, much like this one, when she first laid eyes on Jackson. The annual charity gala at the art museum had always been a highlight of the social calendar, but that year, it became so much more. She had been standing near a particularly striking abstract piece, lost in thought, when a deep voice beside her said, "It's like looking into the depths of someone's soul, isn't it?" Startled, Aubrey turned to find herself face to face with the most captivating man she had ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with piercing green eyes and a jawline that could cut glass, he exuded an aura of confidence and mystery. "I'm not sure I go that far," Aubrey replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "But it certainly makes you think." "Jackson," he said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "Aubrey," she answered, taking his hand. The moment their skin touched, she felt a jolt of electricity course through her body. It was as if every nerve ending had suddenly come alive, awakening something deep within her that she hadn't even known existed. From that moment on, Aubrey and Jackson were inseparable. Their connection was instant and intense, a whirlwind of passion and desire that swept them both off their feet. Jackson was unlike anyone Aubrey had ever met before. He was brilliant, charismatic, and endlessly fascinating. A successful entrepreneur with a penchant for adventure, he introduced her to a world of excitement and luxury she had only dreamed of. For Aubrey, a small-town girl who had moved to the big city to pursue her dreams of becoming a writer, Jackson represented everything she had ever wanted. He encouraged her ambitions, pushing her to take risks and believe in herself. Under his influence, she blossomed, her talent flourishing as she poured her heart and soul into her work. Their relationship was a secret, hidden from the prying eyes of society. Jackson was a public figure, his every move scrutinized by the media. Aubrey understood the need for discretion, even reveled in the excitement of their clandestine affair. Late-night rendezvous in luxury hotel suites, stolen moments in hidden corners of the city. Every encounter was filled with a heady mix of danger and desire. But as the months passed, Aubrey began to notice cracks in the perfect facade. Jackson's mood would shift suddenly, his temper flaring at the slightest provocation. He became possessive, questioning her every move and demanding to know her whereabouts at all times. Still, she clung to the memory of the man she had fallen in love with, convinced that his behavior was merely a result of the stress he was under. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon that Aubrey's world came crashing down around her. She had been working on her latest novel, lost in the flow of words, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Curious, she opened it, only to feel her heart stop in her chest. The message contained a series of photos, Jackson with another woman. They were intimate, leaving no doubt as to the nature of their relationship. But it was the last photo that truly shattered Aubrey's heart. It showed Jackson and the woman standing in front of a quaint country church, matching rings glinting on their left hands. Aubrey felt as if she were drowning, gasping for air as the reality of the situation crashed over her. Jackson was married. Every moment they had shared, every promise he had made had been a lie. She was nothing more than the other woman, a dirty secret to be hidden away and discarded when convenient. In a daze, Aubrey confronted Jackson that evening. His reaction was not what she expected. Instead of denying the accusations or begging for forgiveness, he became cold and calculating. "Did you really think someone like me would end up with someone like you?" he sneered, his handsome face twisted into an ugly mask. "You were a distraction, nothing more. It's time you understood your place." His words cut deeper than any knife, leaving Aubrey raw and bleeding. She fled from his presence, tears blurring her vision as she ran through the rain-soaked streets. For days, she barely left her apartment, alternating between bouts of uncontrollable sobbing and numbing emptiness. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place: anger. anger at Jackson for his betrayal, but also at herself for being so naive. She had allowed herself to be swept away by pretty words and empty promises, ignoring the red flags that had been there from the beginning. Determined to take control of her life, Aubrey threw herself into her writing with renewed vigor. The pain and betrayal she had experienced fueled her creativity, pouring onto the pages in a torrent of raw emotion. Her novel, once a light-hearted romance, transformed into a searing exploration of love, lies, and the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience. Months passed, and Aubrey's life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. Her novel was completed and, to her surprise and delight, quickly picked up by a major publishing house. As the release date approached, she found herself caught up in a whirlwind of interviews and promotional events. It was at one of these events, a book signing at a small independent bookstore, that fate once again intervened. Aubrey was in the middle of signing a copy for a young woman when a familiar voice caught her attention. "I always knew you had it in you." Looking up, she found herself face to face with Jackson. He looked older somehow, the weight of his choices etched into the lines around his eyes. For a moment, Aubrey felt the old pull, the desire to lose herself in those green eyes once more. But then she remembered the pain, the betrayal, and her resolve hardened. "What are you doing here, Jackson?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions raging inside her. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I saw the reviews of your book. I wanted to congratulate you." Aubrey studied him for a long moment, taking in the designer suit that hung a little too loosely on his frame, the slight tremor in his hands. "Thank you," she said finally, her tone polite but distant. "Is there anything else?" Jackson opened his mouth, then closed it again, seeming to struggle with what to say. Finally, he blurted out, "I made a mistake, Aubrey. I never should have let you go. I've left her. My wife. I want us to try again." Time seemed to stand still as Aubrey processed his words. A year ago, they would have been everything she wanted to hear. But now, looking at the man before her, she felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. "No, Jackson," she said softly, shaking her head. "What we had, it wasn't real. It was a fantasy, built on lies and half-truths. I've moved on, and I think it's time you did too." The look of shock and hurt that crossed Jackson's face was almost comical. He had clearly expected her to fall back into his arms, grateful for the opportunity to reclaim what they had lost. But Aubrey was no longer that naive girl, blinded by love and willing to accept crumbs of affection. As Jackson turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, Aubrey felt a weight lift from her chest. She had faced her demon and emerged victorious, stronger and wiser for the experience. The success of her novel opened doors Aubrey had never dreamed possible. She found herself traveling the world, speaking at literary festivals and universities about her work. And it was on one of these trips, at a writer's retreat in the south of France, that she met Oliver. Oliver was everything Jackson wasn't: kind, gentle, and unfailingly honest. A fellow writer, he understood Aubrey's passion for words and the sometimes solitary nature of their chosen profession. Their relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared interests. As Aubrey stood on that cliff, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The crumpled paper in her hand was a letter from her publisher, informing her that her second novel had just hit the bestseller list. But more than that, it was a symbol of how far she had come. She thought about Jackson, wondering briefly where he was and what he was doing. But the thought no longer brought pain or regret. Instead, she felt a sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned and the strength she had discovered within herself. A warm hand on her shoulder drew Aubrey out of her reverie. Turning, she found Oliver standing beside her, a soft smile on his face. "Ready to head back?" he asked, his eyes filled with love and understanding. Aubrey nodded, taking one last look at the darkening sky before allowing Oliver to lead her away from the cliff's edge. As they walked hand in hand towards their rented cottage, Aubrey felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had weathered the storm of passion and betrayal, and emerged on the other side stronger and more self-assured than ever before. The intense, secretive relationship with Jackson had been a crucible, burning away her insecurities and naive notions of love. In its place, she had forged a new understanding of herself and what she truly wanted from life and love. The scars would always be there, a reminder of the pain she had endured, but they no longer defined her. As she and Oliver settled in for the evening, curled up on the couch with glasses of wine and well-worn books, Aubrey felt a sense of contentment she had never known before. This, she realized, was what true love looked like, not the all-consuming passion that burned bright and faded quickly, but a steady flame that warmed and nurtured. Yet, even as she basked in the glow of her new life, a small part of Aubrey couldn't help but wonder about the road not taken. What if she had forgiven Jackson that day in the bookstore? What if she had been willing to give him a second chance? These thoughts weren't born of regret or lingering feelings for Jackson, but rather a writer's curiosity about the infinite possibilities that life presented. Each choice, each decision, led to a different path, a different story. And wasn't that, after all, what made life so endlessly fascinating? Aubrey's musings were interrupted by Oliver's gentle voice. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with affection. She smiled, leaning in to place a soft kiss on his lips. "Just thinking about how life has a way of surprising us," she replied. "How the things we think we want aren't always what we need." Oliver nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. It was one of the things Aubrey loved most about him, his ability to give her space to process her thoughts and feelings without pushing or prying. As the evening wore on, Aubrey found herself drifting back to memories of her time with Jackson, not with longing or regret, but with a sense of detached curiosity. She thought about the highs, the passionate nights, the whispered promises, the feeling of being the center of someone's world, but she also remembered the lows, the gnawing doubt, the constant fear of discovery, the soul-crushing pain of betrayal. In many ways, her relationship with Jackson had been like a drug. Intoxicating and all-consuming, it had lifted her to dizzying heights only to plunge her into the depths of despair. It had taken time and distance for Aubrey to recognize the toxic nature of their connection, to understand that what they had shared wasn't love, but a dangerous addiction. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to regret the experience entirely. Without it, she might never have found the strength and resilience that now formed the core of her being. She might never have pushed herself to pursue her dreams with such single-minded determination. And she might never have recognized the quiet, steady love she now shared with Oliver for the precious gift it was. As the night deepened and Oliver drifted off to sleep beside her, Aubrey found herself reaching for her laptop. Opening a new document, she began to type, the words flowing from her fingers as if they had a life of their own. "The heart is a treacherous thing," she wrote. "It leads us down paths we never intended to travel, into the arms of those who have the power to destroy us. But it is in the breaking that we find our true strength, in the healing that we discover our capacity for love, real love, the kind that builds rather than consumes." Hours passed as Aubrey poured her heart onto the digital page. When the first rays of dawn began to peek through the curtains, she sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. What had started as a few idle thoughts had blossomed into the outline for her next novel, a story of passion, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. As she saved the document and closed her laptop, Aubrey felt a sense of closure wash over her. The last lingering ghosts of her past had been exorcised, transformed into art that would touch the hearts of others who had walked similar paths. Crawling back into bed, she curled up next to Oliver, who stirred slightly and wrapped an arm around her. As she drifted off to sleep, Aubrey's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude for the lessons she had learned, the strength she had found, and the love she had discovered. In the years that followed, Aubrey's career continued to flourish. Her third novel, inspired by her experiences with Jackson, became her most successful yet, touching a chord with readers around the world. She received letters from countless individuals who saw their own stories reflected in her words, who found hope and healing in the journey of her characters. Jackson, too, moved on with his life. Aubrey heard through mutual acquaintances that he had sought help for his issues, working to become a better person. While they never rekindled their relationship or even friendship, Aubrey found that she could look back on their time together with a kind of bittersweet nostalgia, recognizing it as a crucial chapter in her personal growth. And Oliver. Oliver remained her rock, her safe harbor in the storm of life. Their love deepened with each passing year, growing stronger through the challenges they faced together. They married in a small, intimate ceremony on the same cliff where Aubrey had once stood, contemplating her past and future. As she exchanged vows with the man who had taught her the true meaning of partnership, Aubrey felt the last pieces of her heart slide into place. The intense, secretive relationship of her past had shaped her, for better or worse. But it was this love, steady, honest, and true, that would define her future. In the end, Aubrey realized that life wasn't about avoiding pain or chasing endless passion. It was about growth, about learning from our experiences and using them to become better versions of ourselves. It was about finding the courage to open our hearts again after they've been broken and recognizing true love when it finally comes our way. And as she looked into Oliver's eyes, filled with unwavering love and support, Aubrey knew that she had finally found her happily ever after. Not in the fairy tale romance she had once dreamed of, but in the real, messy, beautiful life they were building together.